everyone, welcome back to my channel. Minasan konnichiwa. I know it's been a long time since I've been back and I apologize, but I'm back today to discuss Japanese language learning tips because that's something that we all love to talk about here. So I'm going to be sharing with you different tips for different levels of Japanese language learners to advance your studies on your own. So if you're interested, please stay tuned and thanks for watching. If you are new to my channel, my name is Susie. Thank you for stopping by. Some of the OGs know that I originally started this channel as a beauty channel, but also because I was learning Japanese. I majored in Japanese in college. I spent some time living in Japan. And since then, I have left Japan, but I still advance my Japanese studies through self-study. So let's go ahead and get started with tip number one. Whether you like it or not, one of the best ways that I learned Japanese was through textbook usage. So some of us were able to use textbooks through language learning through an instructor, like in school or an academy or private lessons. And some of us just purchased the textbooks and learned on our own. I believe I still have a video or two up from like way back when on what were the books that I was using when I was first learning it. But let's just go ahead and refresh that. I have 3 different books for 3 different style learners that I really find useful, and I think you may too. So this is an integrated approach to intermediate Japanese by the Japan Times. This is a really good textbook, and this publishing company, Japan Times, makes really good textbooks for those who are learning in the classroom setting or like a little bit more of that structured approach. An alternative to Japan Times is Genki. I think a lot of Japanese language learners know that book, Genki's 1, 2, and 3. I used Genki when I was in college, and that was a great book. But the intermediate approach, Intermediate Japanese by the Japan Times, this was really helpful when I left Japanese language learning classes and I was studying by myself. This has the similar approach of Japanese language textbooks where they focus on sentence structures, they focus on grammar, and they focus on vocabulary. Since this is the intermediate version, there's a little bit less English involved and more kind of fill in the blanks and situational contextual Japanese language learning. However, whenever I find myself needing to refresh on Japanese kind of grammar style and what's the best way to use the vocabulary in a sentence, I definitely end up picking this book back up again. The next book is Tobira, the Gateway to Advanced Japanese Language Learning Through Content and Multimedia. I think a lot of people know Tobira. Like, this is a really well-known and respected Japanese textbook, but Tobira is mostly for advanced learners. I know for those who are taking JLPT, the Japanese Language Proficiency Test, this is a great tool to help you in that. So this one utilizes, like it says, multimedia, so it has some audio functions. There's like some attached CD-ROMs that you can play to watch the video settings, but you could also listen to for audio. There is nice little fun things too. For those of you who like manga style comics, they have the comic style approach. They have situational textual Japanese. They also have Japanese sometimes by region. You know, a lot of places have dialect, which I thought was really interesting. And that's usually something you learn when you live in Japan or you engage with native Japanese language speakers. Sometimes things are said differently depending on where the person is from. But Tobira does sometimes tell you this phrase is from the Tohoku region or this phrase is from the Kansai region, which is really helpful. Definitely, if you are more advanced or hoping to become advanced, Tobira is a great tool to assist you on that journey. And if you're interested in taking the JLPT test, this is also a good resource for that. Speaking of manga and comic book styles, this is Manga de Wakaru. This is learning Japanese through manga style, so through the comic style. This is using manga to understand practical Japanese honorific expressions, beginner level. This is a good book for the beginners out there. Like, seriously, this is a really good one. And I like this one because a lot of us are into manga, a lot of us are into anime, so this kind of helps break it down with those kind of cartoon style approaches, situational approaches, things maybe you have heard or read through manga or heard in animes, and it's really good. It just kind of makes Japanese not in a like grammatical textbook way, but in a, if you're shopping at the grocery store, this is how the conversation might go. If you are eating at a restaurant, this is how the conversation might go. So this might actually be really good for those who are maybe planning on visiting Japan or you really like manga, but you're not entirely sure how to understand some of it, this is a really good book for that. It also comes with an additional CD-ROM, so you can hear the audio, you can hear pronunciations, which is really important if you don't have access to native level or native speakers, Japanese speakers. It's really good to make sure you're hearing the way things are said so you can practice as well. So this is a good book for the beginners, and it has 3 CD-ROMs in it, and I think it has multiple versions. I will go ahead and post everything in the description box below, so make sure you check down and see if the book you're looking for is linked there. Flashcards. Flashcards were something, this is something that I had actually started utilizing when I was living in Korea, and I felt like I was maybe losing my Japanese language learning abilities. Because I was so focused on learning Korean at the time, I had flashcards, and I would read these flashcards when I was on the train, in between classes, like before bed, when I was just chilling. These flashcards are so good, and I have like 4 different sets of them. Here it says looking at, and I'm not sure if you can see it, but on the English side it says the girl is looking at the running boy. There's an illustration, and then on the back there's the Japanese translation. Looking at is o mieru. I will say though, for the flashcards, at least for these particular brands of flashcards, you have to have a base level of Japanese already. There is no additional explanation here. It's just memorization. You know, you may have already learned this, you may remember this, but let's go ahead and refresh that memory. So the flashcards are meant for that. This is not a beginner one. I would say this is more intermediary to advanced level, but perhaps there's probably beginner level flashcards. If I can find some, I'll go ahead and link them down below. But flashcards are just a good way to refresh your memory on the go. Very simple, easy, we love it. This tip is for my more advanced Japanese language learners, and I'll go ahead and insert a clip here. But one of the best things to do is to actually watch Japanese productions. And I'm not talking about anime, which is great, and that'll be like part 2 of this tip, but I'm talking about watching Japanese news, watching Japanese television shows, watching Japanese programming where it's native Japanese speakers who have conducted this, and they're showing it. Now for me, at least, I definitely focus on Japanese news. I transitioned from Japanese language learning in the college setting to Japanese in the work professional setting, and I had to keep up with honorifics. I had to keep up with what's going on in Japanese politics and Japanese economy, and so I utilize NHK for that resources. And what I recently learned that I thought would be so helpful for you all is that NHK offers this News Web Easy. So basically it's for those Japanese language learners that are trying to learn more advanced Japanese style, but maybe they can't read the kanji characters all the time by themselves, or, because let me tell you, Japanese newspaper, Japanese news is so different than any Japanese you might think you know, from whether it's textbooks or anime or manga. This is like 3rd level, 4th level style Japanese. Use of honorifics, use of keigo, use of very formal Japanese style, standard dialect, usually Tokyo standard dialect, so there's no variety here. But it's one of the things that if you are thinking about engaging Japanese in a more professional business setting, then this is the type of Japanese you really need to know. So NHK offers this service where they offer the kanji characters with the hiragana on top, which is called furigana, so you can see and read it a little bit easier to help you with your kanji memorization. They speak a little bit slower because we all know native level speakers tend to speak fast without realizing it. But if you're someone who's learning another language, or you've ever had to learn another language, you know how hard it is sometimes to pick up when the tone is fast. So they slow it down, they speak clearly, and they offer the kanji with the furigana if you're reading it. It's a really good tool, and I really recommend it for anybody trying to advance their Japanese to a more business level setting. Anything you do to absorb Japanese language is good. There's nothing wrong. It's all about how you build up and assess your language learning ability. And most importantly, you just have to try. You're not gonna be perfect. No one is ever gonna be perfect unless you're a native level speaker. So you just have to be willing to make those mistakes, and you just have to keep trying. Okay guys, those were my tips for learning Japanese for different levels. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to thumbs up. Follow me on social media. I will list my handles here, and I will see you guys in the next video. I promise I won't be gone long. All right guys, thanks so much. Minasan, jamata ne. Arigato. Bye bye.